Pete Townshend was master of guitar destruction until Jimi Hendrix set his on fire. What Pete said next shocked the world. June 18, 1967, Monterey, California. The Monterey International Pop Festival was making history as the first major rock festival, bringing together the biggest names in music for 3 days of performances that would define a generation. 35 acts performed across the weekend. The Mamas and the Papas, Simon and Garfunkel, Janis Joplin making her breakthrough, Otis Redding bringing soul to the rock audience, Ravi Shankar introducing Indian classical music to the West. It was a convergence of every major force in contemporary music. The Who were scheduled to perform on Sunday night, and Pete Townshend was confident. His band had developed a signature move that closed every show. Pete would smash his guitar to pieces while Keith Moon destroyed his drum kit. It was violent, theatrical, shocking. Everything rock and roll was supposed to be. They'd been doing it for years in British clubs and on tours across Europe. For American audiences at Monterey, it would be their first major exposure to the Who's brand of controlled chaos. Pete had perfected the art of guitar destruction over hundreds of performances. It wasn't random violence, it was choreographed chaos. He knew exactly how to swing the guitar to create maximum visual impact without hitting anyone in the audience. He knew which parts of the stage to smash it against for the best sound. The hollow boom of wood hitting wood, the metallic crash of strings snapping. He knew how to make destruction look like performance art rather than mere vandalism. The Who had been doing this for years, and it had become their calling card. Audiences came to see Pete smash guitars the way they came to see Jagger dance or Dylan sing. But there was a problem at Monterey. The Who weren't the only act destroying instruments that night. Jimi Hendrix was also on the bill, and Jimi had his own finale planned. The festival organizers faced a dilemma. Both bands wanted to close their sets with instrument destruction. Both wanted to be the last act of the night, so their dramatic finale would be what audiences remembered. But only one band could go last. John Phillips, one of the festival organizers, found Pete and Jimi backstage on Sunday afternoon. "We have a situation," he said. "You both want to close the night with big finales. Someone has to go first." Pete looked at Jimi. Jimi looked at Pete. There was mutual respect. Both were guitarists, both were innovators, both understood the importance of a powerful closing, but neither wanted to go first. Whoever went first would have their moment overshadowed by whoever came after. "Flip a coin?" Jimi suggested. Pete nodded. Fair enough. John Phillips pulled a quarter from his pocket. "Call it in the air." "Heads," Pete said. The coin spun, landed, came up tails. Jimi had won. The Who would perform first. Jimi Hendrix would close the night. Pete's stomach sank. He knew what this meant. The Who's guitar-smashing finale, which had shocked audiences for years, would now be the warm-up act for whatever Jimi had planned. And Pete had seen Jimi perform. He knew Jimi wasn't just a guitarist. He was a showman, a provocateur, someone who understood spectacle on a level most musicians didn't. "Good luck," Jimi said to Pete, genuinely friendly. "You too," Pete replied, but inside he was already worried. That evening, the Who took the stage around 10 p.m. They were explosive. Pete's guitar work was fierce. Roger Daltrey's vocals were powerful. Keith Moon's drumming was manic perfection. John Entwistle's bass held it all together. They played My Generation, Substitute, and Happy Jack. The crowd loved them. Then came the finale. Pete swung his guitar over his head and smashed it into his amplifier. The sound was deafening. Wood splintered. Strings snapped. The crowd screamed. Keith Moon kicked over his drums, threw his kit into the air, and set off a smoke bomb that engulfed the stage. It was chaos. It was violence. It was The Who at their peak. The crowd went wild, standing ovation, screaming. It was one of the best performances of The Who's career to that point. Pete walked off stage, breathing hard, sweating, exhilarated. They'd killed it. The guitar destruction had been perfect. Backstage, Pete felt satisfied, but also apprehensive. The Who had just delivered an incredible performance, but now Jimi had to follow it, and Jimi had seen what they'd done. Whatever Jimi was planning, it would have to top guitar smashing to make an impact. 45 minutes later, the Jimi Hendrix Experience took the stage. Jimi walked out wearing a bright, psychedelic outfit, his Stratocaster slung over his shoulder. The crowd was already hyped from The Who's performance. They were ready for more chaos, more volume, more destruction. Jimi started with Killin' Floor, a blues number that showcased his technical skill. Then Foxy Lady. Then Like a Rolling Stone. Each song built in intensity. Jimi wasn't just playing guitar, he was making love to it, torturing it, making it scream and moan and cry. He played behind his head. He played with his teeth. He humped his amplifiers. It was sexual, aggressive, and unlike anything most of the audience had seen before. Pete watched from the side of the stage. He'd heard about Jimi's playing, but seeing it live was different. Jimi wasn't just technically proficient, he was communicating something primal through his instrument. Pete, who considered himself one of the best guitarists in rock, felt humbled watching Jimi work. Then Jimi launched into Wild Thing, and Pete knew something big was coming. Jimi's playing became more frantic, more violent. He was building to something. The crowd sensed it too. The energy in the venue was electric. Near the end of Wild Thing, Jimi stopped playing coherent music and started creating pure noise. Feedback screamed from the amplifiers. Jimi ground his guitar against the speakers, creating sounds that were more like sonic warfare than music. He was bent over his Stratocaster, coaxing sounds from it that shouldn't have been possible. The crowd was mesmerized and confused. What was happening? This wasn't music anymore. It was something else entirely. Then Jimi did something Pete had never seen before. He knelt down and pulled a can of lighter fluid from behind his amplifier. He'd hidden it there before the show, planning this moment. He began spraying it on his white Fender Stratocaster while it lay on the stage, dousing it thoroughly. The crowd in the front rows could smell the lighter fluid. Some started backing up, sensing something dangerous was about to happen. Pete, watching from the wings, thought, "No, he's not going to..." Jimi pulled out a match. The flame was tiny in his hand, almost invisible in the stage lights. "Oh my God, he is!" Jimi lit the guitar on fire. Flames erupted from the Stratocaster, orange and yellow tongues licking up from the body, spreading across the strings. Real flames, not stage effects or clever lighting. The guitar was actually burning. The lacquer on the body caught fire quickly, creating thick black smoke that rose into the California night sky. The crowd gasped in unison, then screamed. Some people in the front rows backed up, sensing something dangerous was about to happen. Pete, watching from the wings, thought, "No, he's not going to..." Jimi stood over his burning guitar, coaxing more flames, more smoke. He picked it up, the guitar still on fire, and smashed it on the stage, sending burning fragments in all directions. Then he threw the destroyed, flaming pieces into the audience. People scrambled to catch them, to own a piece of the destruction. The crowd went absolutely insane. Nothing like this had ever been done at a rock concert. Pete's guitar smashing was violent and theatrical, but this was ritual sacrifice. Jimi had taken the idea of guitar destruction and transformed it into something mythological. Backstage afterward, Pete sat in stunned silence, still processing what he'd witnessed. The Who's finale, which had seemed so powerful an hour earlier, now felt quaint by comparison. They'd smashed guitars with anger and aggression. Jimi had immolated his with ceremony and intention. They'd created noise and chaos to close their set. Jimi had created a religious experience, a ritual that felt ancient despite happening in modern California. The difference was profound and humbling. Other musicians backstage were talking excitedly about what they'd seen. Did he really just burn his guitar? Was that planned, or did he lose his mind? How is that even legal? Everyone was trying to process the moment, to understand what it meant. When Jimi came backstage 20 minutes later, sweaty and exhausted, smelling like lighter fluid and burned wood, Pete walked up to him immediately. The moment was captured by several photographers who'd been documenting the festival. Pete Townshend, master of guitar destruction, approaching Jimi Hendrix, who just redefined what destruction could mean. In the photos, you can see Pete's face showing genuine awe and something like relief that he'd witnessed it, rather than just hearing about it later. "That was," Pete started, then couldn't find words. Jimi looked at him, slightly concerned. "Too much?" "No," Pete said. "That was perfect. You made it beautiful. I smash guitars for shock. You made it mean something." This moment, Pete's admission that Jimi had taken guitar destruction to a level the Who couldn't match, became one of the defining stories of Monterey. It wasn't competitive. It wasn't jealous. It was one master acknowledging another master's superiority in a specific art. Years later, in a 2017 interview on the 50th anniversary of Monterey, Pete reflected on that night. "When I smashed guitars, it was about rage, about frustration with equipment that didn't work properly, about the limitations of the instrument. It was destruction as anger. When Jimi set his guitar on fire, it was destruction as art. He made it beautiful. He made it ceremonial. I felt like I'd been doing it wrong the whole time." The interviewer pressed him, "But the Who continued smashing guitars for years after Monterey." "We did," Pete admitted, "but we knew we'd been topped. Jimi had shown us what destruction could be. After Monterey, every time I smashed a guitar, I thought about Jimi's burning Stratocaster. I knew I was doing the loud version, and he'd done the transcendent version." The Monterey guitar burning became one of the most iconic moments in rock history. The image of Jimi kneeling over his flaming guitar appeared on magazine covers, in documentaries, in histories of rock and roll. It defined him as a performer who would go further than anyone else, who understood that rock wasn't just music, it was theater, ritual, mythology. But what many people don't know is that Jimi was terrified to do it. Before the show, he'd told his manager Chaz Chandler, "I don't know if I should do this. It's dangerous. Someone could get hurt." Chaz had replied, "You're closing the show after the Who. Pete's going to smash his guitar. You need to do something that makes people forget about that." "What if it goes wrong?" Jimi asked. "Then it goes wrong," Chaz said. "But if it goes right, you'll be a legend." It went right, and Jimi became a legend. The burning guitar also cost Jimi a significant amount of money. The Stratocaster he destroyed was expensive, around $400, which in 1967 was substantial. Jimi wasn't wealthy yet. He was still a working musician trying to make it, building his reputation show by show. Burning a guitar meant burning what was effectively a month's rent. His manager, Chaz Chandler, was furious about the expense afterward. "Do you know how much that guitar cost?" Chaz yelled. "We can't afford this kind of showmanship." But Jimi understood that some moments are worth the cost. "That guitar bought us more publicity than any advertisement could," Jimi told Chaz later. "Every newspaper is going to write about it." Jimi was right. The next day, newspapers across America ran stories about the guitarist who set his instrument on fire. Within weeks, the footage would be seen by millions. Pete Townshend understood this too. He'd been spending money destroying guitars for years, but after Monterey, he started thinking differently about it. Jimmy's guitar burning made me realize that destruction has to mean something, Pete said in a later interview. You can't just smash things for shock value. The audience sees through that. Jimmy's fire meant something. It was about sacrifice, about offering something valuable to the moment. That's why people remember it. The coin toss that determined the order of performances became part of rock mythology. If Pete had won, if The Who had gone last, would Jimmy still have burned his guitar? Would it have had the same impact? Would it be remembered the same way? Pete himself addressed this in interviews. Losing that coin toss was the best thing that happened to me at Monterey. If we'd gone last, we would have smashed our guitars, the audience would have applauded, and that would have been that. But because we went first, I got to watch Jimmy. I got to see what guitar destruction could be when it's done by someone who understands ceremony, who understands that destruction can be creation. It changed how I thought about performance. The relationship between Pete and Jimmy after Monterey was respectful and warm. They weren't close friends, but they had mutual admiration. Pete knew that Jimmy had topped him at his own game, and instead of resenting it, he celebrated it. That's the mark of a true artist, recognizing greatness even when it overshadows your own. Jimmy, for his part, respected Pete enormously. He loved The Who's music and considered Pete one of the great rhythm guitarists. The guitar burning wasn't meant as a challenge to Pete, it was Jimmy doing what he did best, pushing boundaries, going further than anyone expected. The footage of the Monterey guitar burning was included in the documentary Monterey Pop by D.A. Pennebaker. Watching it today, over 50 years later, it still has power. The flames look real because they were real. The danger looked real because it was real. And Jimmy's face, illuminated by the fire, looks both terrified and ecstatic. The face of an artist who's created something he's not sure he can control. Pete Townshend was the master of guitar destruction. He'd perfected it, made it theatrical, turned it into art. But at Monterey, Jimi Hendrix showed him that there were still levels to reach, still ways to make destruction mean something more than noise and violence. Pete's confession 50 years later wasn't bitter or regretful, it was grateful. Pete said, "Jimmy showed me what was possible. He showed me that you could take something I thought I'd mastered and transform it into something I'd never imagined." That's what great artists do. They show you possibilities you couldn't see. The burning guitar, the coin toss, the moment when Pete watched from the wings and realized he'd been topped, these became part of the Monterey legend. But the real story is about two artists, both masters of their craft, both willing to acknowledge excellence even when it came at their own expense. Pete Townshend was the master of guitar destruction until Jimi Hendrix set his on fire. And what Pete said next wasn't shock or anger. It was admiration. It was recognition. It was one genius bowing to another genius who'd just shown him a new way to see the world. If this story of artistic excellence and mutual respect moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell. Share this with someone who understands that true greatness means recognizing when someone else has topped you. Have you ever watched someone take something you thought you'd perfected and transform it completely? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like this video for more untold stories from music's greatest legends.